Now, coming up next, we've got some familiar faces, Joe Plata and Paul Foster, who are going to do a live demo of the corrective actions feature in Beacon Quality in just a few minutes. And again, that'll be Joe and Paul in just a minute.
Okay, so what we're going to be covering today is a corrective action demo. So this is a newer piece of Beacon Quality that I should introduce myself. Again, my name is Paul Foster. I'm the product manager for Beacon Quality. And this corrective action piece is something a little different than audits, which you are all probably familiar with within Beacon. And so we're going to show you kind of the general workflow for how it operates. And I've got another incredibly detailed, amazing PowerPoint presentation for you, which just, we're just going to go into the demo. We'll do it live. All right, so logged into Beacon Quality, and I'm here on my home page. And you can see here in the My Activity panel, and you may have noticed this if you were looking for it earlier, but in My Activities, I have some corrective action events and tasks assigned to me. Now, the corrective actions piece in Beacon Quality is really designed to be a workflow and standardization and data tracking tool. We're, again, not trying to replace any of the collaboration or teamwork that goes into a robust problem-solving solution. So what I'm going to cover is what it looks like to fill out a corrective action within Beacon Quality. We'll take a look at what the setup looks like after that, because it makes a little bit more sense once you've seen it. And then we'll take a look at some of the reports. And Joe's going to help me out with some of the approvals during the process of completing the corrective action. So in order to create a new corrective action, I have a new corrective action tab over here. And so you can create them directly from the home page or from the reporting page that we'll get to later on. And these can be initiated from any sort of place that you want to start your corrective action process, whether it's from customer complaint, internal audit findings, or you're trying to track down the cause of some systemic problem that you've been finding in your reports. So if I come over to the new corrective action, I have very similar to starting a new audit. I want to first select a document. So I have an 8D template here. I have a customer-specific one. I have a short RCA, and this is the one that I'm going to focus on today. We'll take a look at what the 8D one looks like that I've built out. But this one we'll be able to complete all the way to the end. Now, you see 8D there, and just like with LPAs, Beacon doesn't come out of the box with an 8D template. We provide you the tools to build out your corrective action to match whatever process you have, and we just have noticed that 8Ds are incredibly common. So we'll give a title here. So this is the Beacon User Summit. And then the site that this applies to. So just like with all of the audit functionality, if I'm only responsible for a single site, then that's what I'll see in this dropdown. But since I have access to all of the sites, I get to choose from that list. We'll choose Arlington. That's our most common one. And then we get to assign some owners. So who are the people that are responsible for this corrective action? Now, you can select multiple people. I'm going to go ahead and assign myself since I'm going to be completing most of this. And then since Joe's going to be helping me out, we're going to add Joe 2 because he's better than Joe 1. And then approvers. So who do we want to approve this corrective action once we've completed all of the work within it? And Joe's going to help me out there. And then we get to set the due date. So when are we expecting this corrective action to be completed by? We'll just go ahead and choose the end of the month there. Now, the corrective action is broken down into different tasks that you can assign to different people. And so these next two fields are just asking, who do you want to start off and set as the default for those individual tasks that you'll see kind of what those are a little bit in a minute. I'm going to assign those to myself. And then we're going to set Joe as my approver here. And I know I mentioned it for the owners, but the approvers for the whole entire corrective action, it's also true you can assign multiple people. And then you can include a more detailed summary. Now this title up here, this is what shows up in reports and in emails, notifications that are sent out. The summary is for a more detailed write-up. And then we'll create that. And this is going to take us into the actual event page. So this is your actual corrective action report. It contains all of the information about this corrective action. So the first section here that we see on the top is just the general information. We have the due date that I can extend if I need to. We can see the day opened, and then you'll see the date closed once it's closed. We can track the status of the corrective action. So right now it's in progress and it's on time. Once it goes past that due date, it'll change to past due, as long as it's still in progress. If it's closed, then of course we don't change it to past due. And the status flows from, and you'll see this, in progress, pending approvals, to closed. I can continue to adjust the description here. The next section is the people section. So these are the people that are involved in the corrective action. We can see who created it, that's myself. We can see who's assigned to it as an owner. I can always assign more people if we realize that somebody else needs to be involved. And then we see the approvers, and we can add more people again if somebody else needs to review this before it gets marked as closed. The next section here is the fields section. And this section is where the customizability starts to come in. So out of the box, it's going to come with a couple drop downs and beacon relevant fields. So I can choose severity. I can choose where did this corrective action, if it was an escaped part from our process, then where did we find it? Escape impact, I can choose a dollar amount. And whether or not you want to use these is completely up to your preference. We'll teach you during a pilot or implementation of how to customize this to match the information and the data that you want to capture and standardize. And then here's where it ties back into Beacon. So we can tie it back into audit findings if you're doing your internal audits in Beacon and you want to implement a short corrective action process and document it here, or if you're, again, tracking down some sort of systemic issue that you found just by doing your mitigations and by doing your LPAs and the recurring mitigations. So I do need to select one of these. I'm going to go ahead and select this. Let's see if I have something from a little bit more recent. Here we go. Rich did this the other day. And so you can tie back into those audits. And you can see here that some of these fields are required. They have that classic red star, and some of them do not. You can add as many of these fields as you want. And here's another example of a different type. It's one of those free form. So process department, we'll say engineering. But that's just an example of a field that you can enter in any information that you want. You can also tie this into that location tree that you're all familiar with your audits. So we said this was relevant to Arlington, and we'll say it was machining. And then if this is tied back to your customers, you can pull up a list of your customers in Beacon and select one there. And then there's a place for attachments, where you can attach relevant documents. So if you received pictures, or you have some sort of write-up or email messages coming through, and you want this to be your central point of reference to find all that information, you can attach those here. So the next section after all of those details is these tasks. Each of the tasks follows the same pattern. There's a title, which will show up in some of the reports. There's a description, and these are like instructions for what the person that is assigned to this task should be doing. And again, you all get to customize and type in whatever you want here. So who is this task assigned to? So I have it because I selected it at the beginning myself, but I can reassign this to anyone else if I realize that I'm really not the best person that should be handling this. And along with all of these assignments and come notifications so that people know when they've been assigned to something and when something is coming up to be due. We can see that this one also has as an approval. So before this individual task gets closed out, then Joe Plata will have to review it and approve it. And each task has a status that you can track and a due date that you can adjust. So we defaulted it to that last date, but if we know that we want to stay on progress to completing the entire corrective action by the end of the month. This one we want to have completed by the 21st. And then I can, again, we didn't build out any sort of fishbone diagram or interactive 5Y tools. We just really want to be the place where you can make sure that everybody knows what the next step is, everybody knows who's assigned to what, and you can start standardizing and tracking the status of your corrective actions to make sure that they move to complete, and you can track the validation of their effectiveness. So we provide a place to include attachments. So in order to close this out, I do need to attach a file. So I think I have a Word document fishbone in my, Beacon User Summit fishbone. Super detailed in that document, trust me. And then some comments. So we'll just say see attachment for now. And then I can close this task. So because I closed that task, Joe Plata receives a notification, and the status changes to pending. And we can see that in some of the, we'll be able to see that in some of the reports. Now, before we pass it over to Joe, I'm going to go ahead and also close this second task. So same idea. The tasks are kind of a template, just with different steps that you want your team to follow to know that they're following a standardized approach for problem solving. Now, there is this other section down here called validation tasks, and you'll notice that it's assigned to me, but I don't have the ability to attach anything or close anything right now. That's because these validation tasks are designed to be a follow-up action after the corrective action is closed so that you can verify or validate the effectiveness of that. It's something that will be assigned to me and show up on my homepage. Again, this is something configurable within the setup that we'll show you later on. All right, so I've submitted that task to Joe Plata. Now, the overall corrective action is still in progress, and I don't have the ability to submit it. You can see the buttons grayed out, and that's because I haven't completed everything. I haven't completed that entire workflow. The task is still pending approval from Joe. So I'm going to pass this over to Joe. And then here, I think we got your other window here. Yeah.
So technically, I'd be like in a different section. We wouldn't be right next to Paul. I get a communication email from Beacon alerting me that, hey, you have an approval to look at. So I'll log in, take a look at that on my desktop, and here I can see that I do have this corrective action event that I gotta log into. Oh. Do we have not the right scope?
Log out, log back in. We just set him up with the corrective action piece. He just needs to reset his permissions. One of the related to permissions, the corrective action piece actually uses a different set of roles. So you all may be familiar with site admin, audit author, manager, auditor. Those are for the audits. And for corrective actions, there's a whole different set of permissioning. So you can more finely control who has access to update the documents, who can create corrective actions, who's authorized to be an owner and responsible for those, who's authorized to approve those. So we built out a whole system of controls that's separate from your audit functionality. We're not going to cover it today, but it is a piece that we'll cover and show you if you want to do a pilot of this or you want to start using it within your system.
So here I'm investigating or kind of reviewing the corrective action. Notice that it doesn't really drive me directly to the task. It gives me an opportunity to really review the corrective action as a whole. So I have an opportunity, if I haven't seen this corrective action yet, take a look at the information, who are related to the corrective action, what are the properties of this corrective action, along with any resources or reference. So now I can drive down now that I have a better understanding of corrective action, I can drive down to the different tasks that were completed and review the information. So here I see that Paul has completed his task. I have the option here to approve or reject. If I were to reject, I can provide a comment, or I can just say, great job, and approve. Yeah. If I have any other task that I need to approve, I can look down and see if there are any. If not, I'll go ahead and hit save, and that will go to the overall, or I can submit it to, right?
Yes, you could.
Because
So-
I'm almost on order.
Exactly. So anybody who's assigned as the owner here has the ability to go in and submit the corrective action for approval. And so since we both have the ability.
And
did
then
you
I'll
switch?
go back and go do my normal day-to-day activities.
Yeah. Well, don't go too far.
Oh. I'm a
So
ring-
I just submitted that one, and let me search here. So here's the, within this is the reports page. Sorry, that kind of just threw us in there, and I just went with it. So this is the reports page that we have right now for corrective actions. Very familiar, same idea as the audits and the mitigations. You have different columns. You can select which columns you want to show up, and you can filter on different columns. You can search for corrective actions. You can export, or you can create new. Now, here's that bit. So you can see that the status of this one that we just created is now pending approval. And we go take a look at that. Now this is Joe's login, so he's has the approval or reject option down at the bottom. So we'll go ahead and approve that. So that moves the entire corrective action into the closed state, and it's closed on time because it was before the due date. Actually, we're good. Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
I think one thing to note is that during this corrective action, if I felt that there was another task that's required, I can easily add that to the corrective action as well.
Yeah, we built it so that there's the standard tasks that come in with every corrective action to standardize that workflow. But, and that's, I always forget about that one too. That's thank you, Joe. You can go in and you can add tasks that may be specific for that one. So if part of the corrective action for this specific one was to order some new equipment, we could create a task that's unique to this corrective action that we can assign to a facilities person and have them then place an order for new equipment. So then the last step after it's been closed is that validation task that shows up at the very bottom, which is, oh, and I'm signed in as Joe, not me. So let me switch back and refresh the page. So I can see the corrective action is closed, and this shows up on my home page, and I get an email notification about it, that now I can go in and I can validate the effectiveness of the corrective action. And it's the same type of workflow for that task, and you can toggle on or off that approval process. So now that I hope everybody's a little bit familiar with what I mean by task, and also what I mean by what we have here up towards the top, which are these fields, let's take a look at the setup for that. So if we come to the Manage page, we have a list of all of my documents. And when we say documents in Beacon, we mean something that is revision controlled and is kind of like the master copy of the activities that you're doing. And so if I go ahead and I search for that short RCA, it's a document, and the category, the type of it, is corrective action. And that's actually an option when you go to create a new document, is to create those new corrective action documents. Now, when we take a look at it, it's, again, very similar to the questions and audit documents in that there's a settings tab, there's approvers, there's revision history. A lot of the structure is the same, but instead of adding questions, you're adding and configuring tasks and fields. So these tasks have some setup. So again, like I had mentioned, you can customize the title, you can adjust the descriptions, make that fit with whatever form you currently have. So the people that we've already worked with on this, they show us their usually Excel document that they use to track their corrective actions, and we go through an exercise of breaking it up. It's like, okay, well, here's a piece where you have somebody that's supposed to put in some comments and then type the date that they did those things. That's a task. You have this other section at the top where they fill out the department and the part number and the process and various things like that, where they're just entering a piece of information, and anybody involved could do that, and that's a field. So we go through the exercise with people that are learning to use this in Beacon of, let's take your existing form and break it up into this different types of input, whether you need somebody to be responsible for something or you just need to fill in information. And that filled in information, you probably want to start standardizing. Excel can do data validation, but then it becomes cumbersome to aggregate and report off of that. You see a couple different options here for the tasks. So requiring attachments, you recall I had to include that Word document in order to close it. Requiring approval, Joe had to go in and approve that I did good work. And whether or not you want to send additional emails to notify the next person, or if you want to make this one of those validation tasks that can only be done after the fact to make sure that it's effective. So you can, when the document's in draft, you can add new tasks, delete, rearrange, edit, all those sorts of things. And then the fields section is where you can edit the options that you want for some the different drop-downs, whether it's the ones that come out of the box, whether it's the ones that you add yourself. Do you want to make any of these beacon-type fields of audits, locations, and customers? Do you want to include them? Do you want to make them required? All of that configuration is in here. And to add new fields, did I add one recently? No. To add new fields, we can just click the plus button and give it a name. So I had mentioned part number, field type. So this is almost exactly the same idea as with the multiple the response types that I covered earlier today, where multiple choice is they choose one, multiple select is they choose many, and free form is they can just type in whatever they'd like. And again, if I choose multiple choice, I do need to choose which list that I configured on the other area section of Beacon do I want to have them select from. But part number, we don't track part numbers in Beacon right now, so we'll do freeform. And so I add that as a field, and I need to make sure that I submit my revision before it shows up in the new corrective actions that I create. Just the same way as when you add questions to one of your audit documents, you need to submit that revision before it shows up in your new audits. And just like the audits, you can set this document to apply to a certain division, business unit, region, single site, entire company. Again, very customizable and flexible to meet your needs. All right, so let's go take a look at some of the reports. So just like with audits where we have some report panels, if we change the filter here, just like we did for those other audit types, there's a selection here, corrective actions. And so we have a couple options here, a couple panels. Some of these are kind of new. We're still looking for feedback of the types of metrics you want to easily be able to track here. We have this site-by-site comparison of corrective actions and what their status is. So this is a great way to see, hey, what is currently past due? Which sites are have not completed their corrective actions when they said they were going to complete their corrective actions? And that's for the entire report. But a leading indicator as to whether or not I'm going to complete my corrective actions on time is whether or not I'm completing my tasks on time. So the second panel here in the middle is looking at those tasks and how many of those are past due. And just like all of our other reports, you click on it, you get a list of all of those. Days taken to close corrective actions. So how long is it taking us from open to close to complete those? We've got some different buckets here that we'd love some feedback on of time frames. Are you opening them and then really not getting around to closing them for more than a month out? Or are they sitting open for 45 days, or are you closing them relatively quickly? This is to help, this panel, days remaining, this is to help you figure out, what's coming up soon or what's past due. So I can see I have two that are 15 days out. So maybe those I don't want to focus on right now. I want to focus on the ones that are currently past due. Corrective actions by severity. So these next three panels, severity, escape ID point, escape impact, this is taking those out-of-the-box fields with the drop-downs and saying, well, what are the selections that we're finding? What are people selecting? What's the breakdown of the data that we're capturing with our corrective actions? And then I had mentioned the list view for corrective actions, but we actually have been taking some pretty big improvements for it, and there is a new corrective actions reports page that includes all of those custom fields that you can add to your corrective actions, which were not available in the previous list view. We also have added date filters, which were not available on the previous view. So this is one of our most active, recently active areas of development, and there's even more coming in our next release. And then the other nice thing is when you're choosing which columns you want to show up, you can rearrange those, which we don't have on any other page now. So this was a nice addition, I think, and this is setting the standard for how we want the rest of our reports to behave. I think I've covered everything. Anything you think I missed?
I think something that we released 2 weeks ago is now the ability to trigger a corrective action from mitigation. So previously, the only way you can create the corrective action is through the home page or going to reports page and creating a new one. Now, as an area owner or a finding owner, there's this new field where, as I'm reviewing the actual mitigation, that I can see that, hey, this is a recurring issue. Maybe we need a more formal corrective action process. So I can trigger that from there and create that.
Yeah, and if we go back, you can see that the one that you selected actually already had one that was created from this process. So once you do that, it automatically links it here. So if we click on this, it'll take us to go look at that corrective action. And you can see that just like for the one that we did at the beginning, I went in and manually selected one. But when you go through that step of initiating it from within the audit, it does that connection automatically. And then you can go take a look at the audit that has that finding, and then you can see that it's linked to the corrective action. You can see the audit results. And if you click on the corrective action, you can go take a look at all of those details, which includes all the fields, including the audit, which is a link back to the audit that you created this corrective action from. Oh, and look, there's corrective. I should stop, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Sometimes I get stuck in my loops.
No, that's good. Yeah, that's it. Really, I just want to make sure that we let you guys know that this was out 2 weeks ago, and now it's a great way for those who have corrective action connected to your instance, you're able to tie directly from the mitigation page. It's a little more streamlined, a better workflow.
So I think that's everything that we wanted to cover in the demo. It was how to complete the corrective action, including getting multiple people involved to approve the work that's being done, filling in the relevant fields and tasks. We took a brief look at the setup for that, how you can customize how those tasks behave, and adding any custom fields that you want. And then we took a look at some of the reports with a sneak preview of what's going to become the standard in the future. So now we'll open it up to questions.
No questions from live chat, but
what features are available on mobile? Basically, is my question.
Mm-hmm. Can you do that just one more time?
What features are available in the corrective action on mobile?
So the mobile app does not currently support the corrective actions. It's it's on the short-term plan. And then it does work from the web on the mobile, though. So you can still do it on your phone, but not through the app. Yeah.
while looking back at your PowerPoint, no, just kidding. Multiple owners
for multiple approvers. So Joe went and signed off on the corrective action. Will it automatically then send out a broadcast email to the other notifiers that Joe's approved it, but there's still 2 owners that have not signed off on it yet? Or how is there a way to track if there's multiple owners on the approvals?
So right now, once it goes out for approval, we send a notification to everybody involved or everybody that's required to approve it. And then we track who is approved or who is not approved in the history, which is similar to the audit trail that we have. All right.